The air was thick with dark smoke, rising in heavy spirals from what was left of the defense outposts in the desert basin of Nerith. Charred steel frames and shattered towers painted a grim picture of a 3-day siege that had pushed everyone past their limits. The sky above was bruised purple, a harsh contrast to the scorched earth below. Corporal Jalen Stroud made his way over rubble and broken gear, each step echoing the weight of battles fought by soldiers with no time to mourn the fallen. The scattered remains of defense lines told their own story, makeshift shields welded from scrap, blasters rigged with spare parts, and barricades made from vehicles that once ran on hope and engine grease. His emergency medkit, clunky and half-empty, felt laughable against the sea of wounded spread across what had once been a command station. But routine kicked in as it always did. Species didn't matter here. Humans, Ilari, even a couple of crystal-bodied Dernic caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. Pain was pain, and someone had to deal with it now that the guns had gone silent. "Medic!" a voice shouted from the half-collapsed antenna tower. It was Sergeant Mira Doss, crouched beside a slumped figure. "Got an Ilari soldier here. She won't accept help, but she's bleeding through her gear." Jalen followed the call to a woman standing in defiance of logic and gravity. She looked like a statue carved from flame-colored stone, still gripping a curved weapon, her back straight despite the fact that the battle was long over. Her name was Sarah Thane. She didn't turn as he approached. "Ma'am," Jalen said, careful to keep his tone respectful. Protocol still mattered to soldiers like her. "Corporal Stroud." "I'm medical." Doss said, "You're hurt." "The wounded come first," Sarah replied without facing him. Her words were sharp, clean. She spoke like someone who didn't waste breath unless it counted. "You're one of the wounded," he answered, scanning the burned section of her armor where a plasma bolt had clearly connected. "Seen worse?" "Sure. But worse isn't the bar for treatment. Treatable is." She finally turned to face him, and Jalen saw why stories traveled ahead of her. Sarah Thane was the kind of legend whispered about in transport ships and late-night barracks talk. But legends didn't bleed. She did. Her amber eyes showed more than exhaustion. They held the weight of choices made in silence. Scars traced her jawline and temple, each one a record of survival. But it was the look behind her eyes that struck him, the look of someone who didn't remember what peace felt like. "When was the last time you stepped off the line?" he asked, activating his handheld scanner even though she visibly disliked being checked. "Rest is for those who don't matter as much," she said flatly. "Everyone can be replaced. But not everyone should be." She was quiet, then studied his face like she was trying to place him in a category: threat, asset, or just another burden. "You're a colony-born, aren't you?" she asked, her voice more thoughtful than accusing. "That obvious? Not many colony kids come out here unless they're stubborn or stupid." "Well, I'm both. But I'm also the guy with the med foam, so, ready for treatment yet?" She didn't answer. Instead, she looked out at the shattered field where soldiers of every kind were picking through the ruins, dragging out equipment and helping the injured get airlifted out. This site didn't matter. Strategically useless. "We spent lives here for nothing," she said. Jalen didn't argue. He waited. "But there were families in the caves behind this ridge," she continued. "Farmers. We stayed because if we left, they'd die. Someone had to hold this mess together. We were all that was left." "You stayed on ground no one wanted to hold," Jalen said. "Because no one else would." Her lips lifted into a tired smile. No pride, just acceptance. That's what duty is. Not medals. Not stats. Just staying upright when everything else falls down. He prepped the injector, his scanner chirping softly as he keyed in treatment protocols. "How long have you been the one standing?" 3 years, 2 months, 17 days. Haven't slept in a proper bed since." "That's not healthy. Doesn't matter how strong you are, even steel wears down. You need time to be more than a soldier." She flinched slightly as the burn gel met her skin, but she didn't pull away. He noticed the tension in her shoulders, the way she moved like every second might bring another fight. She wasn't just armored on the outside, her entire being had become a shield. The makeshift triage zone had been set up in what used to be the center square of the Nerith outpost. Once a staging area for briefings and supply drops, it was now lined with modular medical tents hastily assembled into a web of order amidst the ruin. White light panels cast a clinical glow on blood-stained sand and melted armor. Corporal Jalen Stroud moved from one patient to another, working shoulder to shoulder with medics from both Earthborn and Ilari backgrounds. They treated everything from minor laser grazes to wounds that would need specialist attention once the evac drones arrived. The air was filled with the hum of generators, the clatter of stretcher wheels, and the occasional cry of someone regaining consciousness. And always, Sarah Thane was there. Not as a patient, despite the gash along her ribs that Jalen still hadn't convinced her to properly treat, but as a presence. Steady. She wove through the chaos with the smooth control of someone born for war zones, translating medical commands when language gaps slowed treatment, steadying panicked hands, even making judgment calls when resources ran thin. Everyone listened when she spoke, not because of rank, but because of certainty. "She's been at it for hours," said Corpsman Lyra Hayes, her hands shaking slightly despite the stimulant patches on her neck. "Doesn't she ever stop?" "Doesn't seem like it," Jalen replied, watching Sarah guide a stretcher team while also checking over the cargo manifests for the next outbound medlift. "How long's she been running with this squad?" Hayes snorted softly. "Long enough that half of them think she's unkillable. The other half are too scared to ask." Jalen glanced over at a group of Ilari recruits, barely more than teenagers by human standards. They watched Sarah like she was more myth than person. Worshipful silence. Eyes wide. "She's walked them through 3 battles that should have wiped them out," Hayes added. "Not one soldier lost under her command. Never once failed to pull out with the objective." Jalen shook his head. "Nobody keeps a perfect record that long. Not unless something's different. Or broken," Hayes muttered under her breath. Jalen kept watching as Sarah moved through the field. Soldiers nodded to her, but none got close. They saluted the symbol she had become, not the person. Untouchable, unknowable. She didn't belong to them anymore. She belonged to the war. Later, when a critical patient was brought in with a shredded leg and an exposed artery, Jalen's stabilizer unit fried mid-procedure. With no one else close enough to help, he called out, "Sarah, get over here now." Without hesitation, she was at his side, already pulling gloves on. "There," she said, pointing to a junction in the thigh. "Clamp the branch off that splits above the femoral line. Arterial spread is consistent with Ilari patterns, but the structure's similar enough." "You've studied human anatomy?" 3 years of battlefield medicine. You stop noticing species. You just learn to stop the bleeding. Her movements were crisp, confident. She anticipated his needs before he asked. Together, they stabilized the soldier in half the time it would have taken alone. Jalen was used to working under pressure, but this was like performing surgery with a sixth sense operating beside him. Once the patient was secured for evac, he handed her a bottle of antiseptic and wiped his hands down. "You ever thought of going into med training after all this?" he asked. She didn't even pause. "There is no after. Just different missions. Everyone's tour ends. Reassignment. Rotation. Something." "Not mine," she said flatly, like it was carved in stone. Jalen leaned against the table, watching her rewrap her own torso without a wince. "You think they'll fall apart without you. I know they will. My experience is what keeps them breathing." "And who keeps you breathing?" That made her pause. Not in anger. Not in shock. Just confusion. Like the question didn't quite compute. "I manage," she said eventually. "When?" he pressed. "Between patching bullet wounds, drafting tactics, and carrying the weight of every decision on your back? When exactly do you take care of you?" She didn't answer right away. When she finally met his eyes, there was something flickering there, thin, nearly invisible, but real. A flicker of tiredness not even a lifetime of discipline could fully hide. Something raw. Human. But it was gone a moment later. Another call came in, someone else down. Sarah turned, already moving before Jalen could stop her. Back into the storm. Back into the routine. Because while others had the luxury to collapse, she didn't. She carried the war like a second skin, And no one ever asked if it was too heavy. The evac crafts came in right on cue, slicing through the dusty sky with military precision. Their engines churned up waves of sand and broken metal as they landed hard in the middle of what was left of the Nerith stronghold. Teams swarmed out fast, moving like clockwork, loading wounded, tagging gear, locking down anything they could still salvage from the wreckage. Jalen Stroud found himself constantly brushing past Sarah Thane, both of them buried in the chaotic business of extracting what remained. He worked the triage handoff, checking vitals and flagging critical cases. She handled security protocols, sensitive files, and overseeing which materials got priority transport. Their paths kept crossing like planets caught in the same orbit. Final batch of criticals lifts out in 20, she said, eyes on a cracked data pad, tracking names and serials like a general playing chess. After that, we switched to gear recovery and lockdown procedures. We? Jalen asked, already knowing the answer. She wasn't going anywhere. Site sweeps require a minimum 2-person team, she replied without missing a beat. Standard safety rules. Then, more softly, with a tone so neutral it could have been a weather report, unless you're planning to board with the rest. It wasn't a challenge. Wasn't guilt either. Just fact. Like asking if he took his coffee black or with rations milk. A question that told her something about who he was without changing what she thought of him. I'll stay, he said, surprising even himself with how fast the words came. Field med covers search and rescue too. Might still be someone out there. Something subtle shifted in Sarah's face, something that didn't quite register as thanks, but landed heavier than approval. A nod of respect, earned not given. When the last of the transports thundered into the sky, carrying the wounded to proper hospitals and the gear to more stable bases, silence swallowed the outpost. Not peace, just the eerie stillness that follows a storm. With the machines gone and gunfire long silent, quieter details emerged, the distant groan of bent metal, the rustle of wind curling through shattered halls, the soft sound of Sarah running diagnostics on a data core. How many times have you done this? Jalen asked as they walked a ruined corridor, scanning for structural weaknesses and tagging crates of high-priority tech. Done what? Stayed behind while everyone else gets to leave. She paused beside a shattered comms relay, one boot nudging a spent shell casing out of her path. Her voice came slow. Every time. You get assigned for this, or do you volunteer? I'm available. I'm qualified. Same result either way. Her tone made it clear, labels didn't matter when the work had to be done. She didn't seem bitter about it. Just used to it. Most people have ties. Families. Partners. Reasons to rotate out, Jalen said. I have responsibility. It's simpler. As they cleared corridor after corridor, Jalen started to realize that Sarah's isolation wasn't just a byproduct of endless combat. It was something she chose. Something she wore like armor, more reliable than any body shield. Ever think about what you'd be doing if there wasn't a war? He asked, while they took a short breather near a half-buried sensor node, waiting for the scanning array to finish its sweep. The war defines current conditions, she said. Thinking about other conditions is... She trailed off, clearly searching for the right phrasing. Inconvenient, he offered. Inefficient, she corrected. Or maybe just human. I'm not human. Neither are most humans most of the time. She almost smiled at that, but didn't. Her gaze drifted across the ruins. She was still and silent longer than Jalen had ever seen her. Sometimes, she said quietly, I dream about putting the blade down. About remembering what calm feels like. And then I wake up. People still need me to be the version of myself that doesn't need rest. So dreams get filed under irrelevant. What if what they need isn't just strength? Jalen asked. What if what they really need is you, whole? Before she could answer, the scanner pinged with an alert, an unstable section detected. The conversation ended instantly, sealed off like a door slammed shut. She moved toward the alert like nothing had happened. But Jalen had seen it now, just for a moment. Not the hardened warrior. Not the flawless tactician. He saw the woman who had been holding everything together for so long, she forgot what it felt like to let someone else hold her up. The alert from the scanner led them toward the eastern perimeter, where what remained of the outer wall had collapsed into a tangled mess of alloy beams and scorched stone. The readout showed a faint heat signature, someone still alive, buried deep under what looked like tons of unstable debris. One wrong move, and the whole structure could cave. Jalen and Sarah moved in carefully, every step measured. He managed the integrity sensors while she began removing debris with precision, matching her strength to the sensitivity of the situation. The walls groaned above them, dust showering down with each shift. "Got something," Sarah murmured. Her fingers brushed fabric under a fractured support brace. "Male. Ilari." Breathing, barely. It took them over 30 minutes to dig the kid out, slow and deliberate. They had to stabilize pressure zones and lift by sections, making sure they didn't worsen his condition. When they finally freed him, Jalen ran a quick scan. Compound fractures, internal bruising, mild neural swelling. Rough shape, but if they moved fast, he'd survive. "Kelvek Thainsinger," Sarah said quietly, reading the unit tag etched into the boy's shoulder plate. 18. 6 months into his first tour. "You know him?" "I know all of them," she said without hesitation. "That's how you keep them alive." As they stabilized the young soldier and started prepping him for evac, she continued, her tone more personal than before. "Joined up after his older brother was killed during the raids on Zavros. Wanted to carry on the family name. Thought duty would bring him honor. And now he's learning," Jalen said, checking Kel's vitals again, "that survival and reputation don't always go together." "He's learning the right lesson," she said. "Hopefully in time to make it matter. If he's lucky, he'll recover. Go home. Tell stories about fighting beside legends. If he's really lucky, he'll realize that surviving is enough. And that walking away doesn't mean failure." As they secured Kel for evac, he stirred. Eyes fluttering open, bloodied and disoriented, he saw Sarah, and froze, recognition washing over him like relief from a fever. "Commander," he whispered, formal, reverent. "We held the line," she told him gently. "The civilians are safe. You did your part. You brought honor to your family. Your brother would be proud." "Thank you," he murmured as the sedatives pulled him back under. "Thank you, for not leaving me." "No one gets left behind," Sarah replied quietly. But the words were no longer just for him. They finished the sweep in silence, the kind born of mutual understanding forged under fire. And when they reached the remains of the memorial garden, the unshakable finally began to waver. Names etched in crystal shimmered in the dying light, each one representing a sacrifice that wouldn't fade with time. Sarah paused before one monument. "Derek Voss," she said, her voice suddenly rough. 22. He signed up because he wanted to see the stars. Said he wanted to protect people who couldn't protect themselves. Her hands trembled as she keyed in the command to add Derek's name to the official register. Coordinates linked to the site so his family would know where he fell. A digital echo of a life now gone. "He looked up to you," Jalen said gently. "They all do," she whispered. "That's the problem." Her voice cracked. "They see something that doesn't break. That never falters. They think I'm stronger than I am." "And what are you really?" "Someone who's terrified of failing them," she admitted, the words pulled from a place she usually kept locked down. "I carry the weight of every expectation, every glance, every time they look to me and believe I'll have the answers. And I'm always afraid the day will come when I won't." Surrounded by the names of soldiers who followed her into fire and never came back, the weight finally began to show. Her strength had become her shield, but also her cage. "You know what I hate most?" she said, barely audible. "I can't even grieve them. Not properly. Because if I let myself feel it, if I mourn them, it means I'm not that unshakable figure they need. It means I break too." Jalen stepped closer. Not to fix her. Just to be there. "Sarah," he said, using her name with intention. "You are brave. And you are beautiful." The words weren't romantic. They were recognition. And they hit like nothing else had. She blinked, stunned. "No one has ever," she started, then stopped. "No one's ever said that to you? No one's ever seen me as anything but a weapon." And then she crumbled. Not with rage, not with despair, but with grief, long denied. She fell forward, finally letting it all go. Years of being the anchor. The blade. The one who never wavered. Sobbing like someone who had never been allowed to fall apart. Not once. Jalen held her, not as a medic, not as a soldier, but as someone who saw her. Really saw her. She cried for the ones she lost. For the years that had carved her hollow. For the person she might have become in a world that didn't require her to be steel all the time. And in that moment, beneath the fading light and the silent monuments, two soldiers found something stronger than war. The truth that even the fiercest warriors deserve softness. That behind every myth is a person, and every person needs to be seen as more than just what they can survive. In the quiet aftermath of fire and fury, amidst ruins and remembrance, two soldiers found something war had tried to erase: humanity. Sarah Thane, the unbreakable warrior, was finally seen not as a symbol, but as a soul. Jalen Stroud didn't save her with words or wounds, but with the simple act of standing beside her when she fell. In that shared silence, healing began, not just for bodies, but for hearts too long hardened by duty. The battle was over. The scars would remain. But for the first time in years, Sarah wasn't carrying the weight alone. And that changed everything.